All right, good morning, everybody. Now for the most important session, the people that actually run the cloud and the internet and the pipes. And we were just talking back, I used to be a civil engineer, and I kind of always think of everything in terms of almost water distribution systems and try to keep it all really, really simple. But my pleasure to have two of the foremost engineers for building networks in the world. We have Jack Waters from Level 3 and Hugh Bradlow from Telstra in Australia. I've known Level 3 a very, very long time. We were talking before that you're the founder of the company. Jim Crow was one of really my mentors and someone I really looked up to in the industry. And he, I think, had kind of the right idea for where the world was going. We were just talking about he was kind of 10 years too soon. But I used to kind of call the whole concept network-centric computing 15 years ago. And now it's obviously cloud computing, but all those volume growth that we used to talk about are really, really kind of kicking in. But Jack, maybe you want to start out a little bit in your background and what you focus on at Level 3?
Sure. My background, I've been with Level 3 for 17 and a half years. So I joined when there were 10 people. Now we have about 14,000. So the company's gone through a little bit of growth in the last 17 years. I used to say we're a small startup from Omaha, Nebraska, but now not so much. We operate in 3 major regions: North America, Latin America, and Europe, and have a whole host of services. My particular area of focus has always been the technology platform, developing products and systems to support that, and focusing on our customers.
You?
So I'm from Telstra in Australia, as Tim said. I've been there 19 and a half years, Jack. And 10 years running the research labs, 9 years as CTO, and the last half a year as chief scientist, where I look at the long-term strategic opportunities facing the business and where I think the industry as a whole will go and how it'll influence the broader society around us.
And how are you adopting the network, or are you at all for the cloud? And I think, or maybe you can go back and talk about your strategy on the network and has it changed in the last 15 years, and where do you see things going now from a network perspective?
It sounds so silly today to talk about the original premise, but the original premise, and we were talking about this right before, was that you could build a telecommunications company with its foundation at the IP layer. And today, I mean, it sounds silly, right? Everybody kind of gets it. We all say, well, yeah, sure, that's right. But back then, that was a relatively unique thought. We were talking about the fact that less than 20 years ago, we argued in conferences like this and in technical meetings and standards meetings whether you could ever carry a phone call over IP. Now, if you're in the US, you can watch 4K streaming of House of Cards over your broadband internet connection. So it almost seems funny that we even thought that would be a problem. So at the core of our belief was IP, Internet Protocol, and that over time that the pipe into your business or into your home would become very generic, like an Ethernet connection, and I'd be able to layer on many different services. And those services could be, they will become applications at the edge. Cloud it's an interesting, we're network guys, so we think the cloud is the middle bit, the network actually. But all the technology that we've all developed over the last few decades has been the enabler of what today is we talk about as the cloud. So for us, we want to connect every cloud provider that exists on the planet. And if you're in the cloud business, it's a great business. My guess is that there will be an ebb and flow of who wins and who loses. We don't know, and certainly there's some early winners, but there have been some early losers too. So the cloud is incredibly important, but our focus is really connecting customers to the different cloud infrastructures around the world.
And what's your network strategy? Is it changing because of the cloud?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as Jack says, we tend to be communications providers, so we see the cloud very much in terms of the network, but we're a bit different in the sense that we're addressing end-to-end requirements for enterprise customers. So as customers become more dependent on it, the SLA from glass to metal, in other words, glass in front of you, the user to the metal in the data center, becomes much more critical. And so we're doing things like application assured networking to ensure that the network part is part of that SLA, and that's something that we think gives telco providers a differentiation in that environment. So our focus is very much on being able to deliver consistent, reliable services, particularly to enterprise customers, but more generally across the community.
In that regard, Jack and I were just talking about in the back, he started working for Vint Cerf, who many of you know is kind of an internet legend, father of the internet. I saw him give him a presentation, I've been at my company 18 years ago, and he was kind of arguing against voice really cannibalizing long distance at the time, but he was at MIT, at the MCI at the time. And he kind of, I remember his calculation was saying that the internet at the time could only handle 4% of the capacity of voice calls that were kind of needed, which is true, and he wasn't arguing against the longer term, but there was a huge debate at the time, and there still is somewhat of a debate about quality of service. Can just the public internet handle the quality of service for all these new cloud applications, or is latency so critical that we have to see a lot more traffic on private lines or on guaranteed SLAs? What's your thinking on that, Joe?
I think business will demand a differing level of quality of service. We see that. We sell VPNs, we sell EVPL services, and our customers want to have a different level of service depending on the application, if it's video or voice or maybe less important traffic. The way you ask the question is a really good way to ask it, because technically there isn't anything that stands in the way of the public internet being able to provide a high level of service in the long run. Maybe not today, maybe longer out. There are other issues though, and ones that I think will continue to make businesses and enterprises look hard at what traffic do I want on a public network and what traffic do I want on a private network. Security being probably the biggest and highest profile thing right now. The hardest job in an enterprise now is being a CIO that carries personal card information. And if you follow Target or Home Depot in the U.S. and Sony and all the other recent very high-profile security issues, part of the reason why is because of the public internet. That I can, as a bad person, I can talk to anybody I want to because everyone is connected, and that's something that I think the public internet will have to address in the long term. Is how do we get a much more secure piece of infrastructure that allows more and more of those business critical applications. If not, private networking will continue to serve those needs very well.
So just before we move, is private networking growing as a percentage of traffic, or is your revenue, or is it the public network growing as a percentage of revenue and traffic, do you think?
From a revenue perspective, I'd say that our biggest selling products are really around both. We see great growth in and there's more to that dynamic around IPVPN and Ethernet private line. We see incredible growth on the public internet still. And go look at the Cisco VNI. I think Cisco does a fabulous job characterizing where the traffic is headed, and the growth on our network is extremely robust.
I want to touch on that next, but you're just your thinking also on public internet versus more private internet.
So we're a mobile operator, and mobile is probably now becoming dominant for us in many ways, like in most countries in the world. So you're definitely in the mobile environment. I tend to believe that quality of service is an absolute necessity, particularly for enterprise customers, but I think even for consumers. The experience of trying to make VoIP calls on Wi-Fi versus doing something like the way T-Mobile do it, where you do an R99 call into the cloud, is very, very different. So I don't believe that bandwidth will solve all problems in the wireless environment. Going back to Jack's point about security, I think there's a very important issue here that a lot of enterprise customers are slowly learning, which is you're probably better off from a security perspective, putting your enterprise environment in the cloud than you are trying to protect your own periphery yourself. And the reason for that is companies like us and Level 3 and other telco providers, that security is core to our business. So we have 300 to 400 security professionals whose job it is on a daily basis to monitor and defeat the threats that are coming off the internet. It's impossible for the average enterprise to replicate that group of people. It's just way too expensive and way too difficult. Whereas we can serve enterprise customers at a marginal cost with the same group of people because security is proportional to the size of the threat vector, not to the size of the customer base you're protecting. So I think there's an inevitability about enterprises moving into the cloud for that security reason.
It's a really good point that as a provider, we have a very unique perspective. We get to see a broader range of issues and vectors and attack, C2 networks and all the things that really build up to vulnerabilities for the enterprise. And if you're a single enterprise, you only get to see your own traffic.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty simple comparison, and one that we believe, as well as any big provider, you need more and more data, more and more information, so that you can make more and more informed decisions around security.
So are you beefing up your own security capabilities, adding more employees, putting more money in R&D?
We don't have 300, but we have over 100 security folks in our company. We just literally built a significant footprint for DDoS, which we'll talk more about in the coming months. And for years we've had a large portion of the public internet as part of our service, and we've always had to have just the basic things like filtering at the edge of our network on behalf of our customers, filtering at our peering and interconnection points, and just to help with things like DDoS.
So can I just pick up one thing Jack just said, which is this visibility of all the traffic. The biggest thing now in security is anomaly detection. Knowing what are the unknown unknowns, to quote Donald Rumsfeld. So the fact that we're seeing all this data and we can start applying machine learning techniques to it is the only way in which you can actually do that anomaly detection. So I think that whole visibility of being a provider is going to be critical.
So do you think you can start getting a little bit better pricing premiums on your private networks, broadly speaking, combined with security, as a result of all the changes in complexity and threats?
I think that we'll have services that are very specific to security. I don't know if I'd say that there would be a pricing premium, but I think that there is a real need, and that companies are willing to pay for help with their security issues.
And maybe just stepping back a little bit, have you seen an acceleration in volume growth in your networks because of what's going on with the cloud and the economy, or everything going on, maybe on wireline, and maybe you can talk about what's going on with mobile in Australia?
Well, in terms of volume growth, absolutely, and no question about it. It's driven by video, and I saw some interesting statistics the other day, which just give you a snapshot illustration. Is Netflix is not launched in Australia, but between 250,000 and 500,000 Australians are actually subscribers of Netflix and are using DNS unblocking services to access it. And somewhere I read that it's between 4% and 6% of our network traffic. This is for an unlaunched service. So in the States, it's way up above the 30 to 40% mark already. I think I saw half the traffic or something is now. So yeah, absolutely. Now in the mobile network, that's no different. People are watching YouTube. They're much more watching on mobile devices. So we're seeing steady traffic growth. But fortunately, we've always had a rational pricing policy to actually recognize that capacity, data capacity, volume reflects in real costs. So we've managed to curtail it in the sense that it's not got runaway growth in that sense, but it's still extremely fast growth.
I can't say I'm a fan of that, but because I do watch two 4K Netflix streams at the same time in my 50 megabit symmetrical house, but I'm very lucky.
You wouldn't do it on a mobile network, though.
No, not on a mobile. Oh, so yeah, mobile, I understand,
Yeah.
but on the wireline,
Actually, on mobile for small screen devices, which is what people are mainly watching on, the way in which we've capped our pricing is not an issue for most users.
And do you think you're also seeing accelerating volume growth as a result of all the changes?
I do, and I think it's more, the volumes are so big that it's hard I'd say it's hard for the cloud as a class of traffic and volumes. It'd be hard for the cloud to move the needle just yet, because I think it's still pretty early on. Absolutely 100% video is the driver of traffic today. And you could construct an argument that we're just at the beginning, not even close to the end of penetration for video. I think the other thing that if you look at broadband connectivity and speeds per household, there's a bunch of things going on if you dig one level deeper. The number of broadband connections in the U.S. is relatively stable. It's not a huge amount of additional households being connected. But if you get out of the U.S. and look towards Asia, look towards other parts of the developing world, that growth is spectacular. So we're seeing huge growth from that. We're seeing huge growth from just connectivity speeds per household, and then number of connected devices is today, it's more than the number of people on the planet. And if you look at different regions of the world, it's 1 for 1 in many parts of the world, and we know that it will get to more than 1 to 1 pretty soon. If you add on top things, the Internet of Things, the 2015-14 buzzword, I think there's a projection out there that says 2020, 50 billion connected devices and sensors, and I personally think that number's low.
I agree with you. Just going back to the traffic and cloud on the mobile network, one thing, and I forget where I saw the statistics, so I can't be quoted on it, but I did see that there's a shift in the downstream to upstream bandwidth from like 5 to 1 to 3 to 1. So a lot of that, I think, is things like Instagram, but we definitely are seeing that that trend will go. It won't be symmetric, but we're seeing that shift in the symmetry occur.
And you're seeing that in your mobile networks?
I can't remember where I got that, whether it was our network or more generally, but that statistic sticks in my mind, that shift of the ratio.
So are you guys doing anything from a network strategy perspective to handle this growth in terms of either equipment or peering points, or what do you think the big shifts in the underlying technology are?
Well, I mean, there's lots of technical detail, things like coherent detection and optical, 100 gig, 200 gig, 400 gig. I was just with some folks earlier, and they were telling me about a 300 gig project that was.
And
really
what's your network running at now, the wavelengths?
100 gig, 100 gig, and so those are all tools in our toolkit, and I mean today, 20 years ago, when I was at MCI, I used to worry every month. I'd worry about, oh my gosh, what equipment are we gonna be able to buy, and how are we gonna put it together to accommodate the growth that we see? Today, I think we have more visibility into what growth and how we will accommodate growth than we ever have. So there's a lot of technology that will continue to help, and with that, the economics improve and all that.
But it seems like 20 years ago, a lot more of the technology was very proprietary, and it seems like now it's a little bit more open standard. Could you maybe talk about how you try to source your equipment, and at a high level, what's going on with pricing trends on equipment?
Yeah, I think the technology world has done a fabulous job converging into a few different underlying protocol standards, Ethernet, IP, some of the encoding technology is all converging, and even in a mobile network, it's all IP underneath today. So that's been a great for us. We always believe that if technologies converge like that, then we will get the benefit of volumes in the underlying subsystems, in standards, and I think we all see that. So that's been our our thesis for a long time that we want to choose technology that has great underlying volume creation, and so data center volumes are something we look really hard at. I don't personally think that 20 companies around the world can drive enough volume to really produce the scale. 10,000 companies can, and so that's why we see more and more data center type technology being used in much broader applications.
So at a high level, maybe you can comment, like, for example, Sprint was just telling me they cut their CapEx last year from $7 billion guidance down to $6 billion, and I asked the CFO why, and he said, we just got incredible pricing on equipment. And we're basically deploying the same amount of equipment out there. So I guess, at a high level, are you seeing more competitive equipment prices as we get more standardization and more elasticity, more volume growth?
There's no question we're seeing that, but don't forget a lot of our CapEx goes into our mobile network, and in a mobile network the price of equipment is probably 20% of the overall CapEx cost. You pay much more for site costs and for infrastructure costs than you do for equipment, and there's no slowing down in the need for growth in the mobile capacity. So, the equipment costs are absolutely important. We are seeing them decline. I think the one area where the standards are in flux is in SDN. We're seeing a lot of sort of discussion, debate, contention around SDN, which is delaying a rapid movement towards standardization. But overall, yes, it's no question, as Jack says, the technology industry has done a fabulous job.
And while we're on SDN, sorry, and a few of those other acronyms there, are you a believer in SDN, or do you think it's just a normal evolution of what we've been doing anyway?
My view has changed a little bit in the last year, and if you go back to the sort of classic definition of SDN, separation of control and forwarding logic, and that's a really interesting idea that applies to a portion of our technology platform, but I wouldn't say a large portion. Where SDN has sort of evolved is that part, that original idea, but then a whole lot around control. So if you hear about netconf or Yang, those are languages or protocols that allow a common way to provision across a very heterogeneous environment. And that's what we all have. We have very heterogeneous environments. We've grown through acquisition over the last 15 years. And so we have many different equipment types. We have many different architectures that we've been converging over time. But that part of SDN is super interesting to us. The idea that being able to provide our OSS and all the control, a common interface across all of our infrastructure that's real money for us.
And you're starting to deploy that?
We are.
So yeah, absolutely. The OSS opportunity is the big one. I probably am slightly different from Jack in the sense that we are a data center provider as well, and clearly SDN has taken over the data center. But I also tend to believe, and again, because we're an end customer provider, I think that in the CPE environment, SDN is going to come in probably much quicker than people anticipate, because particularly in the consumer environment, we're constrained by residential gateways, CPU and memory capacity, and the ability to take a lot of the functionality out of the consumer's home and put it in your cloud will be very powerful as the consumer environment gets more and more complicated because of things like the Internet of Things. By the way, the buzzword of 2014 was big data, but I won't argue too much with you on that.
Do you think that'll be driven on open standards, or like in the United States, we have Comcast as their own proprietary system, Apple's trying to develop something. Who do you think wins in that process?
I think it's going to be extremely complicated, and there's an unknown in the sense of the consumer choice. I don't know whether consumers would prefer a unifying app that controls their own home, like I have at the moment, where I can turn on the lights, I can see the security systems, all that from one app, or whether they're going to just buy piecemeal. I want a Nest app, I want an August door lock app, I want, and that I think is an unknown in consumer behavior.
But there's two ways to view it, though. I think underneath, whether there's 1 or 20 apps, I think that the standards community will have to converge. When you think about just even radio control for the Internet of Things, there has to be a deeper set of standards that everyone implements, or it will.
Although the irony with the Internet of Things is I could reel off half a dozen standards
I know.
right now. So,
Well,
Very true.
unfortunately, I could talk to both of these gentlemen for all day and for hours, but we have time for a couple of questions from the audience here, if we have any. Oh, one over here, Mr. Wyman. One question, please.
Just a quick question going back to Internet of Things on network implications. So I was talking with Peter Coffey yesterday, and he pointed out that some of the existing standards and even architectural principles may or may not still apply as we think about the Internet of Things. So, for example, the notion that the time to die may be shorter because you really need to, if you're doing vehicle collision detection, for example, you don't really need a packet bouncing all around the world because it's too late, or context sensitivity around location. So, any more thoughts around emerging standards and architectures, and are we on the right track, or does there need to be a V7 or a V8 or something to support the 50 billion devices plus?
So look, it's kind of, Joe, that's an interesting point because there's a belief, I think, in the mobile community that 5G will be the one unifying interface to rule them all. I don't tend to believe it. We'd love to think that every one of those 50 billion devices will have a SIM card in it, but they won't. So my guess is about 1 in 100 devices will have a SIM card, and the other 99 will actually be working off a range of mobile standards. And our focus is on, can we incorporate the different types of mobile standards into a unified management environment that we can still deliver an SLA from and deliver coverage and capacity. So I don't think there will ever be a situation where there's going to be just one perfect standard. I think it's a case of bringing heterogeneous standards together.
The thing, when you said V8 or V7 or V8, I actually, very specifically, that if that's a question around IPv6, I think it's absolutely the case that we as an industry have to move more ubiquitously towards V6. We have to, and to continue to support, 50 billion things, we're going to need that. But on top of that, I think there's a lot more standards work that has to happen before it's really realized.
We're out of time. Thanks so much. Great job, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.